Hey biology friends, let's finish up the note packet talking about plant anatomy. We left off talking about transpiration in the stems and losing water through the stomata after coming up through the xylem. Well, the stomatas are in the leaves, and so we need to talk about leaf structure and how is it the relationships of what's going on in the leaf relate to where we're going to with the process of photosynthesis. So, when looking at this picture, how many leaves would you say are on this page? How many said 2? Probably none. How many said 6? Yeah, that's what I thought. Because you probably counted each of these as a leaf, but in reality, these are called leaflets. And they are working together to make one leaf. This over here on the left is a simple leaf, whereas this is called a compound leaf. So I would say on the simple leaf, which is what I'm used to seeing, is that this is a blade, a single blade as a simple leaf, but over here the compound leaf is composed of multiple leaflets to give you one blade. It's weird, right? But that's okay. I fell for the trick too. Coming off of each blade, you have something called a petiole. It's not a stem. The stem is the big trunk of the tree, or from the flower, the thing that goes upright. But what connects the leaf to the stem would be the petiole. Kind of a fancy little term. Taking a look at the leaf structure, a cross-section of the leaf structure. When we look at this whole big birdie bracket is the leaf thickness. Okay, so if you were to take a leaf and look at it sideways, you would think it was pretty thin, right? Well, it is pretty thin. But if you look at it microscopically, you can see that there's multiple layers that make up that leaf. And so what I'd like to start with is that we looked at a cross-section of a stem and a leaf, and we said, hey, there's the dermal tissue, which is on the outside, right? So the dermal tissue is going to be here. So we call that dermal tissue. And we know that dermal tissue is on the top of the leaf and on the bottom of the leaf. And I told you that dermal tissue could sometimes be waxy. Well, this waxiness, this layer that's being peeled off the top here, is called the cuticle. The cuticle is waxy so as to prevent water from evaporating off the top of the leaf. Because isn't the top of the leaf what is exposed to the sunlight? And do you want water evaporating out of the leaf when it's being exposed to the sun? No, so we cover it with wax so that it doesn't lose water that way. This layer right here is called the upper epidermis. Well, if we have an upper epidermis, epidermis. I teach anatomy. Epidermis is like our skin, it's our covering. Well, on a plant, we've got the upper epidermis. And then there's an upper, then we probably have to have a lower epidermis. That's going to be down here. And if you look at the lower epidermis, you look along the side here, look along the side, oh, there's a hole in my bucket, dear Liza. No, just kidding. There's a hole in the lower epidermis, and that hole or that opening is called a stomate or a stoma or a stomata, right? It's the openings in the bottom of the leaf. That's what we call the hole. But what's guarding the hole on either side, we come over here to where these lines are. They're pointing at the cells that surround the opening, the stomate, and these are called guard cells. And we're going to talk about how they decide if a stomate's going to be open or closed. It's quite fascinating, actually. So that takes care of our dermal tissue. Well, what else is in, what are the other two tissues? There's the ground tissue. Well, the ground tissue actually comes in two separate layers, and there are names to those, but I'm not going to trouble you with that. So just know that this layer is ground tissue, and this layer is ground tissue. What was the only tissue that's left? The only tissue that's left is the vascular tissue, and that's going to go over here. You actually have more room to write than I do. Vascular tissue is here, and we're going to subdivide that into the two bundles that I said the vascular tissue is composed of, and we're going to say that the top one is the xylem, and the bottom one is the phloem. Wrapped together through a leaf, we actually call it a vein. So when you see all of these here, those are the veins. And those are going to be made up of the xylem and the phloem bundles. The next page is another picture of the same thing. You can see that they've labeled the cuticle. They've labeled the upper epidermis and the lower epidermis. What else? They've labeled the stoma. They've also, on this particular leaf, said that there's a cuticle on the bottom as well. But is the cuticle on the bottom go straight across the leaf? No, because there's openings. There's holes in it on the bottom where the stoma are at. And then they tell you that the guard cells are going to be on either side of the stomata. What they call the palisade and the spongy parenchyma, well, that's the ground tissue, right? That's the ground tissue. And then within the ground tissue, you're going to have your vascular tissue with your xylem and your phloem. So it's just another picture of the same thing. Looks better in color, that's for sure. The functions of the leaves. You've known, at least I hope you've known, throughout the course of your lifetime here on this planet, that the main function of the leaf is to do photosynthesis. And in order to do photosynthesis, the plant requires water, carbon dioxide, and a light energy of some sort. Well, in this picture, the light energy is going through the top of the leaf, so through the cuticle that's clear, through the dermal layer, the upper epidermis, and what they're going towards, what the light is going towards, is these little organelles. So chloroplasts, which are organelles, with pigments. We'll talk about pigments in more detail on another day, but these pigments are going to absorb the light energy. And when they absorb that light energy, they are able to convert carbon dioxide into sugars. Carbon dioxide comes in through the stomata, so you see the arrow coming in. Water is required for this process, and the water enters the leaf via the xylem. Once we make our sugars, the sugars are going to leave the leaf via the phloem to travel throughout the plant and be shared or stored, depending on how much food the plant needs in order to grow and survive. What else are the stomata good for? Not only does carbon dioxide come in through the stomata, we know that excess oxygen is going to leave the leaf, and water is going to exit the plant through the stomata as well. let's talk about how that's happening at the stomata. What I'd like you to do is, on this picture on the left, it shows a stomate, which is an opening, right? A stomate is an opening. And then you've got guard cells on either side. Well, the picture to the right actually zooms in on those guard cells and shows you some organelles that are inside. The organelles that we are most interested in are the vacuoles. And I'd like you to take a blue utensil, whether it be a colored pencil, a highlighter, a marker, or something. And I want you to color in the vacuoles. And after, okay, so here's what the vacuoles look like in an open, with an open stomate. And here's what the vacuoles look like with a closed stomate. Which vacuoles look bigger? The ones with the open stomate. Well, what's the purpose of a vacuole? A vacuole stores water. That's its job. So when a stomate is open, it means it has to have extra water stored, right? So when there is a water surplus, that means that there's lots of it. A water surplus means that there are full vacuoles. And if there are full vacuoles, then we have puffy guard cells. And when guard cells are able to be puffy, the stomates are open. So we have to have lots of extra water, which means if you are watering your plants regularly and there's never a shortage, those stomates are always open. And if those stomates are always open, water is being drawn up, right? But what gas is allowed to get in? Carbon dioxide. And if carbon dioxide is allowed to get in, what process can take place? Photosynthesis. Excellent. But if there is a water shortage, the water that's in those vacuoles are going to leave the vacuoles and go to other cells that need the water more than being stored. And so then the vacuoles are going to shrink and if the vacuoles shrink, then we have flattened guard cells. And if the guard cells are flattened, then the stomates close. If there's plenty of water, the vacuoles are full, the guard cells are open, photosynthesis can happen, no problem. If you're short on water, those vacuoles shrink, the guard cells close, no carbon dioxide can get in, no photosynthesis. Water your plants, kids. This next page has a lot on it. I put it in there because I thought it was a really cool picture. But what I want you to appreciate is, again, the different arrangements of the tissues, whether it be a leaf, a stem, or a root. And if the arrangements and the amounts are different, that is going to result in different functions in those three organs. And we know that a leaf does something different than a stem, does something different than a root. Makes sense. A very common theme in biology is that structure supports function. You can't have a function unless you have a specific structure. That makes sense. Our structures are different in a leaf versus a stem versus a root because they do different stuff. So it works. It's a solid thought. So in review, what's the function of the leaf? What's happening in the leaf? What's the process? Did you guess photosynthesis? Excellent. They have adjustable pores. Well, you're smarter than that. What are the pores called? They're called stomates. So that what can get in or out? How about gases? Which gases? How about carbon dioxide and oxygen? Which one goes in? Which one comes out? Carbon dioxide goes in and oxygen comes out. And those gases can move in and out of the plant without losing much water. Do we lose some? Yeah, we do. But it's going to control how much is going to be lost and how much isn't. So this right here is pointing to a guard cell of a stomate. And if we were to draw our own stomate, kind of looks like a set of lips, doesn't it? And once you have your stomate drawn, I want you to draw from the opening an arrow that goes out, an arrow that goes out, and then an arrow that goes in. Remember, make sure that your arrowheads are inside the opening, and then of the other two arrows, the stem starts inside. What's the one thing that goes in through a stomate? The carbon dioxide. What are the two things that come out of a stomate? Oxygen and water. Awesome. On the next page is a typical plant cell. Now, I told you that there's different kinds of cells and the different types of tissue. So we've got parenchyma, sclerenchyma, collenchyma, whatever, guard cells, tracheids, blah, lots of different kinds of cells. But here's a typical plant cell that we're going to show you. And there's a lot of different organelles that are inside this plant cell, many of which probably seem familiar to you from your previous science classes. But here are the ones that I want you to definitely be able to focus on for me in this class. First of which, a cell wall is only going to be found in a plant cell. Some protists, but plant cells. Later on when we're talking about animal cells, they don't have cell walls. Only plant cells do. The other organelles are going to be this thing called a plasma membrane. Well, a plasma membrane is the same thing as a cell membrane. It is going to be the border around every cell, whether it be plant or animal or protist or whatever. It's all going to have cell membranes. We're going to talk about cell membranes in more detail in the next lecture and talking about how things cross in and out of a cell. Okay, so plasma membrane and cell membrane, they're the same thing. Inside the cell, you have all these little organelles, yes, but then you have like this soup, this liquid that's inside the cell that all of these organelles are floating in, and that's called the cytoplasm. Sometimes the cytoplasm is called the intracellular fluid. Intra meaning inside, inside the what? Inside the cell. Oh, and it's a fluid. It's watery based. Okay, so cytoplasm is a water-based solution inside the cell. And that's what all the other organelles swim in. We talked about vacuoles being involved in storing water. In the guard cells, they were the ones that filled up with water or shrunk from lack of water, and that was going to control if the stomates were open or not. All of our plant cells are going to have a little storage spot for their water in case there's a drought. The next organelles that we need to be familiar with, and actually we're going to learn a lot about, is going to be the chloroplast. And with the chloroplast, you can see on my diagram, they're all green. So what I would like you to do is get a green colored utensil, pencil, marker, highlighter, whatever, and I want you to make sure that your chloroplasts are green. Because that's going to be important for us for later on. The other organelle that's going to be important for this unit of energy is going to be the mitochondrion. The mitochondrion to me looks like little kidney beans with like squiggles inside. And I would say get yourself an orange utensil and I want you to color the 3 mitochondrion that we have in there. The mitochondrion is going to be responsible for doing something called cellular respiration, whereas our chloroplast is going to be involved in photosynthesis. Which is why they're important for us. Here is a zoom in of a plant cell. Here is the cell wall. There's the cell membrane. And you see the chloroplasts are right up against the cell membrane. Well, the chloroplasts are important for absorbing light, and so they need to be as close to the edges of the cell as possible. So it's kind of cool to see that picture in there. This page is in your packet. I want to skip it for right now. Maybe what you can appreciate is the big green box around the edge would be the cell wall. Then we've got our cell membrane that is going to be within it. The big white space would be the cytoplasm, and you can see that I've got mitochondria and chloroplasts inside the picture. We will do more with this picture after we've completed the next set of notes. The last 2 pages of your packet are zoom-ins of the chloroplasts and the mitochondrion themselves. What I do need for you to be able to name on a chloroplast is that each of these, they look like little pancakes. The pancakes are called thylakoids. So either pancakes, or if you want to say coins, individual coins, they're the thylakoids. But then a stack of thylakoids is called a granum. So like this whole, I need to change colors, this whole thing right here is a granum, which is a stack of thylakoids. The space that exists between the thylakoids and the membrane of the chloroplast is called the stroma. You need to know those 3 terms. You need to know what a thylakoid is, you need to know that a stack of them is called the granum, and you need to know that the space in between is called the stroma. You can kind of think of the stroma as like the cytoplasm of a chloroplast, right? It's also a watery fluid that surrounds the thylakoids. Everything's surrounded in water. And then when we look at a mitochondrion, the mitochondrion, you see that there's 2 membranes. And the inner membrane, see how it kind of loops in and out? We call those loops the cristae. So they're the folds of inner membrane. Is called the cristae. And then the space in between the membranes is going to be the matrix. So it's kind of like the stroma of the chloroplast, but here we're calling it matrix. Okay? That'll do it for this portion of this packet. Thanks for your patience. Thanks for hanging in there. I hope this was helpful. Thanks for watching.